Welcome to France 24's The World This Week. We break down the week's news with four journalists, 4 points of view. Régis Le Sommier, excuse me, let me start with France 24's finest, Lila Jacinto. Let me get the camera angles right. Brimming with opinions. We'll be hearing from you throughout the show. Thank you very much.
Good to be here.
Régis Le Sommier is with us as well, Deputy Director of Paris Le Match, the French weekly. You're also about to publish a book. It's called, it's on the Islamic State group. It's called, there it is on screen, Daesh, A History. It's in French right now. Any plans for a translation in English?
Well, I hope so. I really do.
All right, so we'll be looking out for it. Matthew Dalton, reporter for the Wall Street Journal, also with us, and Anne Bagaméry, another France 24 regular journalist at the International New York Times. Thank you all for being with us. Let's start with the story of the week here in France, as far as French news is concerned, and that's the eviction of hundreds of migrants from the jungle. That's the shanty town near the northern French town of Calais, a sprawling maze of tents and shacks. It's home to thousands of refugees, most of whom are ready to risk their lives to cross over to Britain. Well, the government says it's just trying to do what's best for them and relocate them, give them better living conditions. NGOs disagree. Régis Le Sommier, let's hear from you first on this one. Is this just PR for the government?
I don't think it's PR. I think the government had to do something about what's happening in Calais right now. It's been a focused point for many months now. Of course, you know, the sanitary conditions inside the camp are dreadful sometimes. Politically, it's been exploited also and also locally, because those people, the life for people in Calais had become a nightmare. So it has to be done one way or the other. Let's remember that before Calais, you know, it's not new that this area of France, in particular, the north of France, had this outpour of migrants trying to make it to England. There was Sangatte before, and Sangatte had the same problem. You know, there was the camp, and they decided to dismantle the camp. That was a few years ago. Now we have this time around, they're trying to do this thing.
History repeats itself, and it seems we haven't learned from our mistakes.
Yeah, and it's repeating in that same area. So it seems that, you know, we have to find a way to, you know, deal with it, and of course including Britain, and that's what has happened. We know with the many meetings that are both our governments have conducted together.
Matthew Dalton, is this a story the Wall Street Journal has been interested in, wanted to report on? What's your take on this?
Yeah, we've been very interested in it. It's been a big political issue in France. It's, I think, contributed to the rise of the right, particularly in the Nord-Pas-de-Calais region.
The far right.
The far right. It's inflamed tensions with the local community. You know, it's kind of exposed some of the vagaries of the European asylum and refugee system, because these are people who really want to get to England, and there are various reasons for that. They have family in England. A lot of them speak English, and a lot of them perceive that their economic opportunities as refugees would be better in England. And a lot of people point out that, you know, if they want to apply for asylum in England, there should be a way for at least some of these people to do that and not try to risk their lives, you know, jumping on trains to get to, you know, on the Eurostar trains and on all the other dangerous things that these people are doing to try to get to England.
Anne Bagaméry, is this, the government once again says it needs to put people in better living conditions. Obviously, the catch-22 situation here is they don't want these better living conditions. So, I mean, doesn't the government have a moral obligation in some sense? And of course, that's the government's argument, to create better living conditions.
Well, what's interesting about the ruling that came down that supposedly mandated clearing out the camp is that it was really a very fuzzy ruling, in the sense that the court did say, the French court did say, you need to move people out of the camp, but it gave no timetable. It did not make movement mandatory, and it left some of the community services and communal spaces that the refugees themselves have built in this enormous camp. Things like community centers and schools and cultural centers. They left those in place. There's a recognition that those are anchors and those are good things. That is in the interest of the refugees to keep them there. But as for moving them out, the government may well feel that, but the ruling definitely doesn't provide teeth, if you like, to move the refugees out. Now, you can argue whether the government should have that kind of muscle to do it. The fact is the refugees are digging in, and it's probably for many of the reasons Matthew cites. They're near England, that's where they want to go. Moving to another place moves them farther
England
away
has made
physically
it,
from
Britain
their goal.
has made it impossible for them to cross the channel, almost impossible, tightening security measures.
Well, how many times have we seen in the history of mankind that people who want to get somewhere, who have a desperate desire to get to a better place, will take any risk, they'll fight any battle to do it? I think what you're really seeing, and several people have alluded to this, is a failure of the European system, not being able to provide a unified and solid way for refugees to make their wishes known, make their rights known, and apply for asylum in a proper way.
But I mean, I think here in this instance, their wishes are known. It's just that Britain won't let them in.
That's right. And also that the fact that they used to have the Eurotunnel where they could actually make it or try to make it. Now it's blocked, so they cannot use the Eurotunnel. So their only hope is to get on board of a ferry, but it's impossible. Or what could they do? They can, hire a boat or try to find any means of transportation that would help them cross the channel, which is very risky. So I'd like to know, we don't have any figures of how many people actually do make the transit and are able actually to leave France and get to England. But I believe it's very few. So they're in a situation where they're stuck. And
what they could do is avail themselves of a system that works, which the EU does not have.
That's right. But
I mean, there's the lack of system and also mixed messages coming for migrants. These may not be the best informed people. So on the one hand, you have the government trying to relocate them, very understandable. This is a European winter. They are living in squalor. On the other, they seem to get the message from NGOs that if you move from here, all sorts of rumors going around the camps that if you move to some of the housing that is being given, you will never make it to Britain because there's a lack of processing. And one very important thing, under the rules, unaccompanied minors should be processed by their destination point. And
that would be Britain for those who have family in Britain.
Exactly, because for most people, you have to be processed at your point of entry or where you apply for asylum. But unaccompanied minor, there is an understanding that they are trying to make their way to family or a support group, and so it is the destination country that is supposed to process them. We had a report from Europol talking about 10,000 missing children. There is complete lack of vision.
And they said most of those kids, by the way, had fallen probably prey to organized crime.
Exactly. And I can tell you, Afghan kids who I've been following will want to make it to Britain, but because that's where their support groups are. And these are children that have just gone missing on the continent.
And Bagger-Mary, you said a number of times that this needed to be a Europe-wide solution, and of course, this problem has been on the cards for months now. We thought Europe had found a Europe-wide solution a couple months ago. They had this plan to redistribute migrants, 160,000 of them, and each country would take in a certain number, and it was all agreed to. It's just not working out.
No, it's not working out. And we've just seen evidence of that this week with Austria and several Balkan countries saying, okay, we've had enough, really. We're not going to do what we maybe initially said. We're just going to stop taking migrants. You're going to have to find something else to do with it. These countries can take unilateral decisions, even though they are part of the European Union, because the European structure with regard to movement of people has never really kept pace with the rhetoric. I mean, Angela Merkel of Germany set such a brilliant moral example when she said, everybody come. But Germany has had problems integrating all of the migrants.
She's the last of the Mohicans now.
To say, people welcome when you have a thriving economy and when you have domestic growth which is close to zero, like we have in France. It's a different situation. And politically, it's easier for Merkel to make that move than for the French president or other countries in Europe who doesn't have a thriving economy.
This is not the way the European Union is supposed to work.
Maybe, but the European Union is not uniform. Countries that still have their sovereignty, and the way the political structure is made in Europe makes it very, very hard for that problem to be tackled.
The problem with that plan, was that it ran into a significant event, which was the November 13 terrorist attacks, and some of the attackers, maybe more than we know, came in among the refugees. It exposed the fact that Europe has very little security procedures, very little idea who a lot of the people who have come in are, and so I think that was kind of perhaps the final nail in the coffin of the
But here's the
And
thing.
you know, there's one country, because I've got to hear all of you on this topic. There's one country that makes this where this argument, I think, resonates perhaps more so than in others, and that's Britain. And what a difference a week makes, because last time we had this show last week, just a couple hours after we were done recording, of course, David Cameron secured his EU reform deal, and he started selling it to his audience and campaigning against Britain coming out of the EU. So just as Britain, as Europe seems under threat, there's this one shred of hope that perhaps it's not going to start to dislocate completely in the next 4 months. Leela?
Well, he got his deal. His own party hardliners were not impressed with it. London Mayor Boris Johnson has come out, and every morning we see more.
And that's a big deal
yes,
for David
and
Cameron.
We see much more establishment figures from the Conservative Party coming out in favor of leaving. And what is important is also this is setting the precedent, because now we have Hungary talking about a referendum on migrants. So we are actually the very week after they tried to cobble together this union. We are seeing the effects of
The domino effect.
Exactly, of countries going it alone. Just one thing on the migrants and on Calais, we tend to, we call the Calais the jungle, and I think the press does have some role in exacerbating this kind of menace. But
Giving the names.
if you look at the numbers, the number of migrants disputed, at most 6,000, not a lot, for rich European countries to take on. If you're talking about whatever you want to call them, the wave of migrants, I mean, there is no solution besides breaking down the numbers and having, a quota system. The European countries haven't even met the quotas that they have agreed to. This is a problem that you cannot kick down the can. I mean, you can't kick the can down, sorry. Summer is going to be here, and,
I think they are trying to kick the problem down the can, but it's not working.
Right, I think we are failing to break down the numbers, because when you really start breaking down the numbers and see the relative wealth of the EU, it's a manageable problem. I think what's happening is everybody's talking and nobody's listening.
Matthew?
Well, I think about the UK, the Brexit debate. The UK already has lots of opt-outs from the EU rules. So I always thought that this...
No euro, and they're not part of Schengen.
They're not part of Schengen. They have opt-outs for a lot of the justice requirements of the EU regulations. So I thought that the Brexit debate, at least what Cameron was trying to get, was there was a lot more kind of symbolism than substance there. But I do think you identified an important point here, which is that countries like Hungary, other countries that don't have these opt-outs from the EU system, are now starting to ask for them, because a lot of them are unhappy with these requirements coming from Brussels. And I think that's really going to be the interesting thing to follow. The domino effect is the more important thing.
Just before we move on to the second part of the debate, really quickly, I want to know just your perception. Is Britain going to leave the EU or not? Yes or no? Leela?
Probably not, but I'd like to have them go.
Matthew? Okay.
Just go.
Personal feeling?
I guess probably not. I think probably most, a slim majority of people, I think, would probably want to stay.
No, they're trying to get the best of a bad solution. I believe they're going to stay.
Oh, they got a good deal, so they stay. All right, Anne?
Yeah, if the emotional argument holds sway, and I doubt that it will, the emotional argument is we don't want migrants, they will leave. If the logical argument holds sway, and there are lots of them, Britain will stay.
All right, so we're almost 50-50, like the British population, I guess. That wraps up the first part of The World This Week. We're back in just a moment.